go in a crisis like this. One of the things that we're seeing is people are doing it incredibly poorly, putting immense pressure not just on their team, but also putting themselves in a very, very dangerous situation. In a moment, I'm going to cross to Natasha Hawker. She's the founder of Employee Matters, an outsourced HR and recruiting consulting firm. She's also the author of From Hire to Fire and Everything in Between. She is a bona fide expert in this area, and she's going to be talking about understanding options to be able to either retain or exit your employees effectively and legally, and how to work from home safely and productively. If you've just sent a bunch of your team to work from home without putting in the appropriate safety protocols, you are exposing yourself to significant risk. So this is important. Some of the things she's going to cover: what are the options to keep your team but reduce costs? What if you have to make someone redundant and how to go about doing that? What are the consequences if you get it wrong? How can you build a productive team working from home? And what are the risks for employees while working at home? She also goes through some FAQs. Can I make my team go casual? Can I make my team work free? Do I have to pay redundancy given the context of the times that we're in? Do I need to consult? Can they consult? Do I need to document any changes, and how? Can I let them take leave? How can I be a great leader amidst all this? Will fair work come out of me? Will fair work come after me? And if you get this wrong, they will, maybe not now, but eventually. Where can I get help, and what are the risks if I get it wrong? She's also offering working from home audit checklists, and a whole bunch of tips and tricks as well. She'll show you how to access that. So enough from me, over to Natasha Hawker.
Thanks, Glenn, and welcome to Surviving the Business and Employee Bloodbath. My name is Natasha Hawker. I am thrilled to have you listen to this recording, podcast, whatever you want to call it. My intention is to give you as much value as possible over the next 45 minutes or so. I don't even know whether it's going to be 45 minutes, because we are doing this and trying to get this content out because it's needed now. And I normally record and rehearse, but I haven't had time to do that. I also need to let you know that I am working from home, as we pretty much all are now. And my kids are in the background running amok, so you may get a bit of noise from them as well. So I just ask you that for your forgiveness if the presentation, whilst the content is absolutely gold, I'm sure of that, the presentation may not be. And I will look at my notes because I want to make sure that I give you everything that I've prepared to share with you this afternoon. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Natasha Hawker from Employee Matters, an employee relations company, and I'm an employee expert. I specialize in helping small to medium businesses create exceptional business performance through their people. Think employee relations, policies, recruitment. We're not doing any of that at the moment. And terminations. And we're doing lots of that at the moment. So let's take a breath and think about what we've experienced over the last couple of weeks. It's like nothing that many of us have ever experienced in our lifetime. And the evolving pace of the change, there is a daily update. It was 1 meter, now it's 4 meters. Hairdressers can work, now they can't work. And it puts your head into a spin as to what you can do. And you only have to turn on the TV and then you feel a whole lot of anxiety. I'm sure many of you are, when you see the panic and the uncertainty. What we do know is we will come out of this. What we don't know is when that's going to happen. So I'm here to help you look at what some of your options are, and we've split this webinar into a couple of sections. This is what I'm hoping to cover off for you. Firstly, what are my options to keep my team on and reduce my costs? What if I need to make someone redundant? How do I do that? What are the consequences if I get this wrong? How can I build? This is really important. And for many of us as entrepreneurs, we've been doing this for years, but how do I build a productive team working from home? I started my business out of my bedroom 8 years ago. And so for me, this is the norm, but for most of our clients and many people who aren't entrepreneurs, this is not normal. And then I wanted to cover off what are the risks for employees working from home, because whilst it's great and you've got computer can do work, it's much more complex than that. And I think we need to be thinking about that. So let's get started. First, the very boring but very necessary part of the presentation. The information that I'm sharing with you today is general in nature and related specifically to the field of HR and does not constitute specific legal, medical, or HR advice. I would encourage you to get specific advice to your circumstances, because every single person who listens to this call is going to have a different situation, and the advice may change and your risk profile may change on the basis of that. The other thing I wanted to say is we strongly encourage everyone to keep up to date on all COVID-19 advice provided by the state and federal government, if you possibly can, given it's changing every second. But where it does require your immediate action, we encourage you to take action ASAP. So I wanted to share this first, but I am going to change it because I think it's really important. This is what Martin Luther King said, Jr. The ultimate measure of a man, and I would add, or a woman, is not where he or she stands in moments of comfort or convenience, but where he or she stands at times of challenge and controversy. I think that's really important. I truly believe that innovation and opportunity will come out of this pandemic for those of us who are brave and who can make calculated decisions. And I say that knowing that for some industries, that's easier than for other industries. But, what did someone say to me the other day? Pivot rather than panic. I thought that was great. Another one is, and this is what we feel like we're doing, we're pivoting rather than panicking, but we're also building the bike as we ride it. And I think that's another great mindset to be going into this. So let's talk about how to survive, because there will definitely be some businesses that go under, and that is so unfair because most of them it's through absolutely no fault of their own. Businesses are currently in a state of disarray, confusion and frustration. And in the space of literally a couple of weeks, I caught up with an accountability group a couple of weeks ago, and you know what? This wasn't part of what our conversation was. This wasn't really there. And now it's everything. You cannot, I was actually, quick story, I was talking to a PR consultant and he said he has never seen a news cycle this long. Not the bushfires, not anything. You cannot talk about anything else than COVID-19. When I was at the hairdresser, you know how you listen to all the conversations, that was a couple of weeks ago. Everybody's talking about COVID-19. That's the one completely consistent topic. But my view is that our environment for the way we operate as businesses has completely changed, in my view, forever, but not necessarily for the worse. You know, as I said, I've run a remote business for many years, and my view is that it's a great way to run a business, and it saved me somewhere in the vicinity of $30,000 to $50,000 a week or a month in rent. And this is the greatest working from home experiment that there's ever been. That said, there's still a lot that needs to be done well to make this successful, and there's a lot of risk you've got to mitigate, and I'm going to go across that. So what are the questions that I'm hearing on the front line? Things like, how do we survive in the current climate? What happens if a team member actually contracts coronavirus and we're forced to shut down? And let me share with you, it is coming. If you don't know someone who knows someone, it's going to be that close. I am sad to say that my brother-in-law's mother has the coronavirus in New York and is currently in ICU on a ventilator. And that's tragic, and it's sad, and it's going to become more common. So it is getting closer to all of us. So what do you do if someone either is in contact with coronavirus or is having to shut down in isolation because they're in contact with them, or they actually have the virus? How do we protect our employees' health and well-being? Because you have a duty of care to do so. How do we understand what our obligations are around data privacy? And how and what should we be communicating to our team, our suppliers, and our clients? Plus many, many, many more questions. I couldn't list them all, but I am going to try and cover off as many as I can as we run through this presentation today. So I wanted to cover this off because I think as entrepreneurs and business owners, we need to have a broad set of skills. So I wanted to start by telling you what we at Employee Matters did to respond. And I have to say, We started running videos about this probably 5-6 weeks ago was when we started, and we could see that. So this is how we've responded in terms of trying to stay safe financially. Obviously, I would encourage everybody to seek great accounting advice. And I do this because I see this as the starting point to understand what decisions you might need to make. So some of the actions that we did, and I encourage you to consider, was we immediately weeks ago went through every single overhead we had. And what we did find that was that we had various apps or resources that we didn't really fully utilize or didn't use anymore. And so we cut those, and that resulted in an immediate saving of, I kid you not, thousands of dollars. So what the next step is to understand what your revenue impacts are going to be. What do you anticipate you're going to make in March, April, May, and June? Work through a variety of financial scenarios. If A happens, then what would that mean for the business? If B happens, what would that look like for the business? And anticipate absences. Even though people are working from home, you're still going to have people who are on sick leave, still going to have people who are quarantined, self-isolated, and also potentially fear-related as well. And it's time to start thinking creatively. If you do need to reduce your employee hours or make cutbacks, or worse still, actually make some people redundant, get appropriate advice. I cannot emphasize that strongly enough, so that you don't end up with fines and additional burdens. And I say this even if you are tragically out of business, those will still sit with you, unless obviously I imagine you declare yourself bankrupt. And I would encourage people to try and think about past the pandemic. This crisis will eventually pass. And the thinking is that when it does pass, actually things are going to really pick up very, very quickly. So it's really important that you don't necessarily panic and get rid of all your team. What of your team making some clever decisions means that you can hang on potentially to a skeleton staff, pare back what you do, and make sure that you're able to survive this crisis. So that when you need to pick up again, because recruitment is really expensive, remember, and some of you have heard me say this before, it costs between 50 and 150% on top of the base salary to hire an individual. So you absolutely want to make sure that you don't have to incur unnecessary hiring costs if there are other alternatives. And the other thing I would say here is to get across the support that the government is offering, which may also assist you. But talk to your accountant, talk to your bookkeeper, make sure that you're getting some good advice there. So let's talk about this in more detail. There are a number of people losing their job on a daily basis, and it's almost imaginable the numbers that we're hitting. Industries such as hospitality, travel, and retail have been absolutely decimated. I spoke to one of my first ever clients the other day just to check in on him, and he was in travel. His revenue went literally overnight from about $300,000 a month to $30,000 a month. His team went from 45 to 10 people, and he reckons he's got 5 weeks left before he's moving back in with his mum, his wife, and his 3 kids under 5. And when I spoke to him about it, I said, then what? And he said, well, when this ends, and it will end, and it's devastating, he said, I've got a computer. I just start doing travel again. And I'm not saying that to be lighthearted about it at all. It's not, it's devastating. But he's already looking forward, regardless of what he's going to face now, he knows that he can rebuild in the future. I'm hoping that our government's going to be more supportive, and I'm talking to them about some ideas there. But anyway, let me ask you a very serious question. Do you or did you have any plans in place to ensure your business could continue to operate? What I mean by that is business continuity plans, crisis management plans, if your business was impacted tomorrow or very soon. And the answer is sadly that most don't, and that's contributing, in my view, to the panic out there. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and there were over 100 businesses in the room, big businesses, many 5 million and above. And the presenter said, how many of you have a crisis management plan? And only 3 people in that entire room put up their hands. So it's not unusual, but I would really seriously hope that people actually put these plans in place, and actually when they recover, This is part of BAU. This is part of what they normally do. So, but it's not too late. I would suggest that you still need to do a crisis management plan today, because this crisis has still got several different iterations, pathways that it can go, and you need to have done the thinking beforehand. So it's not too late to document your plans. At a high level, here's what you need to be thinking about: the key business operational risks, with the overriding intent to minimize the health risk to your employees and your clients and your suppliers, minimize the risk of your premises becoming a node of transmission, whether that's in fact the home, and we're going to go into that in more detail. Plan out what you need to do if an employee or was to be infected by COVID-19 or put into self-isolation. Ensure that alternative arrangements are made with your suppliers, with your customers, so that business operations can continue as much as they can, BAU, and deal with the impact of increased absenteeism or business disruptions. That's what you need to be thinking about. So I'm going to cover off this just because I don't think we can hear this enough, and we do need to remind ourselves. When I look out or I drive around the streets, still social distancing isn't quite fully being understood. So in addition to hand washing and good respiratory hygiene, so sneezing into your arm or throwing away your tissue and washing your hands, social distancing is the best way. Now, let's face it, I had never even heard of the phrase social distancing till a couple of weeks ago, and now it's all anyone can talk about. So what is it? Essentially at the moment, and this is the latest, it's about 4 meters apart. I don't think we're very far from a total lockdown. I suspect that's going to happen over this next couple of days. But what we do know is social distancing is the best way to reduce the risk of getting infected with the virus. It's much harder for it to spread. So we've seen clients adopt a number of different and creative measures to ensure that they're providing a safe place of work. Now, one of my clients, which I'm so proud of, within 24 hours, and they have 100 employees based out of Melbourne, they went completely virtual, remote working. They sent everyone home with screens, laptops, all the necessary supplies so they could be completely up and running in a remote environment. Remember, the vast majority of your team actually want this to be successful. They actually probably are really, in some ways, quite excited about working from home, to be near their family and protect their kids and so on and so forth. So, there's never been a better time to have a supportive workforce to trial working from home. But remember, some of your team are going to be frightened of this. Some people don't work without that structure and that supervision. So you need to take that into account. So if you do have employees either currently or in the future working from home, you must have the appropriate policies and tools in place. Now, what I mean by that is you need a working from home policy, and you need a WH&S, Workplace Health and Safety, audit or checklist in place at a minimum. And we'll be sharing one of those with you today as a gift. So watch out for that. Get everyone to sign it, get everyone to pop it on their personnel files. So let's talk about working from home. As I said at the beginning, I have 100% remote business, and it wasn't just during the COVID-19 break. I started my business out of my bedroom. I have a friend who's a member of this community, and I'm not going to say who it is, but I will quote her because I just laughed and I've quoted it in speaking gigs several times since, who's a psychologist. So that's a bit of a clue. And she said to me, Natasha, working in your bedroom, no, let me get this right. She said, there's only 2 things you should do in your bedroom, Natasha, and working isn't one of them. And I'll leave it up to you to work out what the other 2 are. But essentially, I've been running a business with 16 employees across Australia and New Zealand. And I think that gives me some tips here, which I want to share with you about what really works. So let me share what I found works. So 1, make sure you have that working from home policy before you even consider having employees working remotely. And if you've already done it, fix it up retrospectively. This ensures that your employees have a clear understanding of what the expectations are and their obligations. And it's really important to cover your backside, basically. So make sure that you've got that and you understand your obligations in the WH&S space. Number 2, have every remote employee complete a working from home audit. As I said, we'll be sharing one of these at the end of the session that you can download and use, because guess what? Their home just became an extension of your workplace. It is your workplace, and therefore your safety, their safety working in their home becomes your responsibility. Now, obviously, we've done this en masse, and you can see part of my office here. I'm set up to do this. I've got my desk at the right level. I've got my chair. I've got my footstool. We're going to have people who are suddenly cramped into a dining room table. I did a video call with someone, and I think about it differently, because I've got 3 kids, as I said, who are running around out there now. But she was younger, and she's flatting with people. And so there were 3 of them all sort of cramped into the lounge room, set up makeshift desks, and she's whispering on the phone on her, because she's trying to make it quiet, because they're all trying to do the right thing and all trying to work. But you can imagine how cabin fever is going to potentially set in there, and that's going to be a bigger issue, which we're going to talk about later. Set really clear expectations. When we are asked to come in and manage a performance management discussion with George, I always use George, so apologies to any Georges, I know one in our group, to manage a non-performing employee, the amount of times that we hear from the employee, no one ever told me that I wasn't performing. It's really important that you set deliverables, deadlines, and KPIs, and encourage your team to self-report against these. Trust your employees. I really believe trust begets trust. There is going to be someone who's going to take you for it at some point, but the lift you get in engagement and productivity as a result of trusting your people and giving them the space to create and be accountable for something far outweighs the risks. And remember, as I said, in this case, the vast majority of employees really, truly want this to be successful. And guess what? When we go back to normal work, my prediction is a lot more people are going to be getting rid of space, and a lot more people are going to be working from home, because they've proven it actually does work. Excuse me. It is Friday. I'm going to take a quick sip. Okay, be focused on goals, not activity. Be very clear what you're looking to achieve, and allow your team to actually work out what's the best way to deliver that to you. I truly believe that innovation is likely to be a byproduct of doing things differently. I think we've probably all heard the quotes. Was it Shakespeare came up with one of his plays, I can't remember now, I knew I'd forget that, but came up with one of his plays during a lockdown. It gives us a chance to experience things differently, to think differently. I often used to say I used to do some of my best work on the plane with a glass of wine, because no one could ring me, no one could email me, and I just had my pad in front of me and I just think. Encourage your workforce and give them a sense of togetherness. It is more important now than ever that you continue to build a connected, engaged workforce. Many of you will have heard me say this statistic before. Where you have an organization with engagement levels of 75% and above, when compared to the bottom 25%, you get 21% more productivity and 20% more profitability. Now, who wouldn't want more of that? I think everybody's probably got their virtual hands up. The situation, or the tool that we use, which we think is fabulous, happy to give you anyone an introduction, is called 6 Qs. That's the letter Q. And that measures our team's engagement on a monthly basis. Now, here's one that most of you haven't necessarily heard me say, is that where you have a disengaged or a not engaged employee, it costs you 34% of their salary. I'll say that again, 34% of their salary to have a disengaged or not engaged employee. So the other thing to consider, I think this is an enormously valuable opportunity to train up your team, run remote training sessions. It's a great opportunity to get all your team together on Zoom and upskill them. It's a great opportunity to systemize your business. It's a great opportunity to pivot or come up with new products. The next thing I wanted to talk about is allow some time for adjustment. Now, many employees, this is a massive change for them, and there is going to be an adjustment phase. So we've come up with a working from home pack, which we're releasing this week, with all the tips and tools and templates. Now, for some people, they will just slide on into home base with this. They will get it so easily. Others, the distraction of the kids, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute, the ability to not have anyone looking over their shoulder is going to make things challenging for them. Remembering here too, we've got a whole lot of parents who've just had to start becoming teachers and homeschooling. And I'm sure many of you have heard the thing flying around on Facebook at the moment. Day one of homeschooling, 2 kids have been expelled for fighting and the teacher's been fired for drinking on the job. It is tough, and especially if your employees have kids who are at daycare or stage 1 of primary school, they require a lot more attention. I'm super lucky. My girls just sit down and do their work, and it's online, and they're conscientious. My 11-year-old though, Ben, not so easy. He requires a lot more attention. So you're going to need to be flexible around when they do the work. And you might find people are working at different times to try and balance that off. Last one here is use technology. We use tools like Trello for managing projects, Voxer for communication, stand-ups and Zooms. The reality is there's never been a better time in terms of technology to work from home. So let's go into our next one. Let's look at some other options. This is a really important one. I don't want to go that far backwards. With regards to your employees, you as business owners and managers have a duty of care to protect the health and well-being of your employees. You need to reassure your employees that you're taking the situation very seriously, that you're finding out the latest information, and that you're communicating with them frequently. I would suggest at the very minimum at the beginning and the end of the day. And even if there's nothing to communicate that there is nothing to communicate. It is a big adjustment phase for people. I also think we need to play our part in keeping people calm and reassured and as productive as possible. If you're running around with your head spinning and your eyes jumping out of your head, they're going to follow that lead. So it's really important that you're a voice of reason, a voice of calm. That doesn't mean you can't say, I'm not scared by this and all of that sort of stuff, but it's managed. Ensure that you provide them with updates and advice on how they can protect themselves and the steps that you're taking as a business owner to protect them. My number one recommendation here is if you don't, you really should get an employee assistance program. What's an employee assistance program or an EAP? It's a counselling service that's available to your employees. You can go direct to an organisation or I can help you set that up. But essentially they can call up a counsellor and get some immediate help. What I will say is 38% of Australians are suffering from financial stress before we even got to the COVID-19 situation. What do you think that number is now? I would suggest it's got to be at least double. So you want to be able to provide a circuit breaker so your employees can get some support. You're not a counsellor, you're not expected to be. And obviously the COVID-19 experience, and as it gets worse before it gets better, which is the view that it is going to do, your employees are going to be under significant stress and anxiety, and that's going to play out. So that's a great way that you can support them. I would also strongly encourage you to pull together a list of employees who you may feel need some additional support. This may include employees that already are particularly panicked about the situation, or you have concerns, even if you don't know it to be the case around their mental health. Any employees in a high-risk category, chronic health, age, health issues. Employees that you do know already suffer from a mental health condition. Employees who are suffering possibly suffering from financial stress or hardship, for example, a husband who owns a travel business or a wife who's casual and they're counting on her salary to pay the mortgage. Also a big one, and the jokes are flying around, but it's very serious. Employees who are asked to work from home will struggle. When the kids are off school, the other one is that employees that live alone, there's going to be even more social isolation there, and they're going to struggle potentially with that lack of social interaction. One of the things we did with our team, and I'm going to do it actually, I will talk about one of our lovely members. Kathy Love ran a virtual drink session. That's why I've got my wine with me today. So you can do that over Zoom with your team and just socialize. I've organized one on Sunday with my girlfriends to catch up for a drink, a virtual drink. So think about that. The other point I want to touch on briefly here, well, not briefly, the other point I really want to importantly emphasize here is domestic and family violence. We work closely with the wonderful Janine Lee, who's also a member of our community from Domestic Violence Business Solutions. And there is a real concern amongst the domestic violence help network that there is going to be a spike in the levels of domestic and family violence. Now, remembering 1 in 4 women are involved in a domestic violence situation, 1 in 6 men. Now, for many victims of domestic violence, work is actually their place they go to be safe. That's where they feel safest. That's where often the perpetrator can't get to them. We're potentially putting them into working from home, enforced, with their perpetrator under an amazingly stressful situation with additional alcohol, because everyone's gone and bought lots of extra booze. So I think we need to be very careful, and you have a duty of care as an employer to provide a safe place of work to victims of domestic violence. So I would strongly encourage you to reach out to Janine. She's fabulous at this stuff. She helped a client of ours a couple of weeks ago, and the victim of the domestic violence wrote to her boss and just said, I cannot believe you gave me access to this support. This has changed my life. So it gives me goosebumps. So that is available. Okay, let's talk about exit and leave. I'm trying to keep a bit of an idea on my time. So your employees must follow reasonable instructions, and that includes not coming to work or producing medical evidence to say that they are fit to return, even virtually, if they have COVID-19 and still want to work. And if they do, then that's personal leave. Personal leave is for when an employee is sick with COVID-19 or anything else for that matter, or is caring for somebody who is ill. Now, there are 3 options around managing your team and your resources, at this time. And they all have significant risk attached to them. And I'm going to say up front here, absolutely get legal advice or HR advice before you take these. So number 1 is stand down, and everyone's suddenly aware of stand down because Qantas did it en masse. I think 20,000 employees were stood down. It may be an option to you in your business. I say that again, may. Depending on where the businesses can no longer be operated, but it's a complex area, and seek advice first. And it's everybody is stood down. You can't pick and choose. You need to check your EA or award, but you may be able to direct your employee, and this is one of the best ways to do it, to take leave if that leave request is reasonable. So if you've got employees that have got 6, 8, 10 weeks of leave, it's a liability sitting on your balance sheet anyway. You may as well use it, and they might look to use it up over this time so they've got some income coming in to survive when it picks up. So I think that one is really important. Long service leave, there's some legislation being rushed through now to give people access to their long service leave. Again, the theory is we can keep employees in the business for longer, so we're ready to ride up when it improves. Last resort is redundancy, but you need to meet a number of criteria. Is it genuine? Is redeployment an option? And have you consulted? So that is critical. The other one I wanted to touch on here is casual employees. And our casual employees in the hospitality industry, I was talking to a friend over email. She's got 2 of her children home now because they're unemployed. That work has dried up overnight. But be careful, even though casuals don't accrue annual leave along, or my camera's just gone off. Let me just pause here. Just one moment, Subu. I've just got to pause a Zoom I'm in. Bear with me.
Hey, hi, Natasha. This is Subramaniam. Are you on the call?
Yes, I've just paused bear with me. I may need to, can I buzz you back? I'm just in the middle of recording something. Okay, I'll call you back.
Yeah.
Thank you. If you can just log out, Subu, that would be awesome, and then I can continue my recording. Ah, I told you that things could happen. That was my India call from 4:30 coming through. My apologies, guys. And I'm going to need another sip after that juggle. Okay, where were we up to? We were up to the last one, which is casuals. So, where are we up to? Yes, casuals actually accrue long service leave. So even if you terminate your employees and they have over 5 years service, you're going to have to pay out their long service leave. So don't get caught out with that one. So what I wanted to do now, guys, and we'll whiz through these fairly quickly because I'm conscious of your time. I've come up with 10 questions that I wanted to answer for you that are the most common ones that I'm being asked at the moment. Let me just move into present because you can see all my cheat notes there. Can I make my team go casual? The short answer is no. Because remembering that the law is not built for a crisis like this. It's built more for normal circumstances. And going from permanent to casual is highly risky. But one thing I would say to give you a little bit of hope is almost anything can be agreed with an employee as long as it's mutually agreed and it's not forced and it's reasonable and you've been through the right processes and you document everything and it's legal. So you can get creative. Next question is, can my team work for free? This one's a definite no. As much as everyone here is absolutely trying to do the right thing and they want to see the business survive, this is a definite no. Because the reality is, from a legal perspective, they are most likely that they would continue to accrue wages and entitlements. That one's a no, I am afraid. Next one is, do I have to pay redundancy? The answer is you will need to pay redundancy if you have over 15 employees. And remember, that's across associated entities. So I had a client today who rang me and said, I've got some of my employees in Sydney and in New South Wales, some of them in Queensland. If I add them together, there's 15. If I treat them separately, then I don't have to pay redundancy. Well, that's not the case. That will not stand up in court. That will be deemed to be, it's the one organisation, they're just in different state locations, and he will need to pay a redundancy payout if he makes his people redundant. The other thing is, an employee must have, so if you have over 15 employees, they must have over 12 months service to be entitled to redundancy. It works on a various pay scale, so the more service you get, the more redundancy pay you get. Remember, they get an extra week if they're over 45. So there's a few things there. Again, get some advice if you are going down that route. Let's look at, do I need to consult? Regardless of whether you need to pay redundancy or not, you absolutely need to be procedurally fair, and that includes consulting. And this is one of those ones people find a little bit funny. A redundancy conversation cannot be one conversation. A redundancy process roughly goes something like this. You've determined that an individual's role can no longer be done. You have a conversation with them and you say, hey, George, we're concerned that your receptionist position no longer exists anymore. We would like to let you know that that role is at risk. We're going to go away and have a think about what other options or redeployment options we have for you. And I'd like you to go and do the same. And then let's meet back in a couple of days after you've had a chance to think through that and see if there's any other alternatives. If there's not, we'll go down the redundancy route. I'm going to give you an indication of what you'd be looking at from a payout there, blah, 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 blah. So that's what true consultation is. And if you haven't done that, you're going to fail the unfair dismissal test. So it's really important that you understand the process and follow a correct process in redundancy, even if you don't have to pay out a figure. Next one is, do I need to document any changes? Absolutely. There has never been a better time, where have we heard that one before, to document every single conversation, decision, and ideally have the employee sign it. Now, say you're having a difficult conversation and the employee says, I'm not signing that. Then you sign the document, you sign it saying, I asked George to sign this document and he refused to do it, but I did have the conversation with him, sign it and date it. So it's really important when we try and unscramble the mess that some people are going to be in, and as your defense, because you cannot stop someone taking you for unfair dismissal. What you can do is reduce the chance that they are going to take you. And if you've got evidence, if you have to attend a mediation session, you can say, here's what I did, this is where it's documented, this is the conversation we had, you see George signed it here, to protect yourself against any of those accusations. Can you get them to take leave? Absolutely. Think about long service leave. Think about unpaid leave. Some people who might be wealthy enough might go, you know what, I'm going to take 3 months off and study, and I'm happy to take it as unpaid leave, a bit like parental leave. You may do annual leave. So there's lots of different leave options you might like to take, and think about whether that's a possibility. Remember, it's a negotiation. You want to consult. You need to show that you're trying to do whatever you can. And look, you know, if you can, you're gonna those liabilities sit on your balance sheet anyway. You may as well get rid of them. So have a think about that. This is really important, especially in this time. How can you be a great leader? People don't leave organizations, they leave leaders. You have to step up absolutely at this time and be the best version of yourself, the best leader you can be. And I know that's a big ask, given we as business owners are fighting for survival, fighting for our own survival in this as well. To be a great leader, a couple of things. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Be authentic, be real. That doesn't mean you have to tell them everything, but be real. Ask what support they're going to need, you know, especially those ones that are going to be doing it tough at home in a really tiny confined space. And be flexible. You know, work with your team to get a great result. I can tell you the leaders that do this really well, their engagement levels are going to go through the roof, absolutely through the roof. Here's one. Will Fair Work come after me? The answer is yes. I had somebody tell me a story the other day that said, tell Fair Work, I think they'd illegally let go a couple of people, 11. And when we said to them, you can't do that, and they said, well, tell Fair Work to come after me because I won't have a business left by the time they do that. They will still come after you. Fair Work are predominantly employee biased. They're going to be even more employee biased at this time. So it's this pandemic is not an excuse for you to not do the right and legal thing by your employees. And it's my view that Fair Work will use every power in their capacity to enforce employment law and the rights of employees, regardless of the backlog that I think they're going to have at this time. For your reference, for an employee to say that they've been treated harshly or they've been unfairly dismissed, and the test is, was the termination harsh, unjust or unreasonable? It costs approximately $69 and a call to Fair Work. Do you reckon they're not going to give it a go in these current circumstances when money and panic is high? So I would encourage you to try and negotiate, consult, work your way through this. It's going to work much better for you if you do get a claim that you were seen to be trying to do the right thing rather than just be horrible person. And also the way you exit someone might have repercussions for the benefits that they're eligible for. And that's going to be really, really critical for them as well. So question 9 out of 10, we're almost there. Where can I get help? You can call Fair Work to get advice on 131394, and their website is pretty comprehensive. You can search that as well. I did speak to a new client yesterday and they were talking to lawyers, but don't go straight to a lawyer. The lawyers are there when things have gone wrong. They haven't gone wrong yet. So get HR advice first, and then obviously and there are many other great members of the community that can help. Okay, what are the risks if I get this wrong? There are a couple of risks here. From a WH&S perspective, this is the only piece of law you can actually go to jail for. And there are significant fines for breaches. So for example, in the event of a death or related to work, I think the fine is, I think it's 12 months jail and up to $3 million fine. The unfair dismissal test is, was the termination harsh, unjust, unreasonable? You've probably heard those stories in the past where people received a text message to say you're gone. That would be deemed to be harsh. It's up to 6 months salary and or reinstatement. Now, it's unlikely they're going to reinstate at the moment, and so that it's going to be a financial penalty. So that's not cheap. Breaching the Fair Work Act can cost you up to $63,000 for the business or the corporation, or $12,600 for you as a director or a manager. So where there are multiple breaches in an organisation, those fines increase, and I kid you not, to $630,000 where there are systemic breaches, and $126,000 for you. So it's really important that you get this right. So an example of breaching the Fair Work Act that's really easy for everyone to understand is not consulting on major workplace change. So in the past, in the good old days, if you said, we're moving the offices to Parramatta, you could just pick up and move the offices and everyone just had to come with you. It didn't really matter what they thought of it. Now you actually have to consult with them. So have a conversation, put it in writing, ask for their feedback. Doesn't mean you're necessarily going to take all the feedback on, but you've asked for it. So the other big risk here, as I see it, is if your employees have set hours, and most do, you need to check those hours. They don't, you know, they might want to have some flexibility about working at night because the kids are asleep, but you can't work them every day or hour under the sun, because then that's going to be breaching there and would potentially attract overtime rights as well. So get them to document on a timesheet the hours that they're doing, or pick up some systems. I've heard rescue time is a great one. There's some that can measure when you've come into the system and how long you're on the computer, so think about that. All right, let's go to what's next. We have gone through a heap of content. I hope that's been useful, and we've gone through lots of FAQs at speed. I promised you some gifts, so we will get you access to a working from home audit and tips and tricks to working from home. But I recognize that some of you might need more. So at Employee Matters, we've just built this working from home pack that you can get, and just mention you were on this webinar and you can get a 10% discount. But if one of the other things we're trying to do is, everybody needs this information. So what we've decided to do, and we've really hastily put this together, is a podcast. And the lovely Dent members came up with the name, or confirmed the name today, which is HR Heroes. So watch out for that. Hoping to get that out next week. And we're going to showcase some members of this community that are doing great things in this space, namely Janine Lee from Domestic Violence Business Solutions and Graham Coan from Are You OK? So watch out for that. And we can give a lot more detail in those. Lastly, thank you for joining us today. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's been educational, inspirational, or it's generated some ideas for you. Do connect with me if we're not already connected on social media. And please, as Dent say, feedback's our fuel. I think I'm probably one of the first ones to get one of these up. If there's other stuff we should have been covering that we weren't, do let us know. And the last thing I wanted to say here is, they're my details, you can contact me. I believe the secret to building exceptional businesses and getting through exceptionally difficult times like the one we're in now is your team. Your employees are your greatest asset and also potentially your greatest liability, and should be treated as such. I would like you to be building employee assets. Super important to remember that a pandemic doesn't alleviate you from your employer obligations under Fair Work, and my view is they're going to be even tougher on you. My final piece is to say, stay close to your people. This is a hard time for you, for me, for everyone in our communities. Keep the lines of communication open, support them, and show extra care and compassion. And remember, your employees really do matter, and business really does matter. Thanks, guys. Have a fabulous time. Please share if this has been useful. Let people know about it so as many people can get across this content as need be, so we have businesses survive and thrive post the pandemic and not go under. Take care. Talk soon. Bye.
So there's more where that came from. Den has put together a crisis response team where there is a whole series of talks to be able to help you navigate things like leadership, sales, marketing, HR, finance, operations, and all of the key things you need to get really right to make sure you can navigate, not just survive, but thrive in the times that we're in. Again, dent.global/reinvent is the destination for everything you're going to need to be able to make the most of indeed these challenging times. I hope you found this useful. My name's Glenn Carlson. Be brave. Have fun. Let's go make a dent in the universe.